Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're bringing a new episode. I'm your host, Mark, and welcome to Verano 17:11 Podcast, a place where we discuss Bible and religion. Today, I am joined by Beverly Gaventa. She is back. Beverly, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. And you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I sent an email to him, Beverly, because I promised last time she was on the show. I hope we can find a time and a place to talk about your new commentary on the book of Romans. And that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna be, just gonna be taking our questions and having just a conversation about this commentary that she published. So I'm ready for that. Beverly, as always, just give us a bit of a background for maybe people who's new to your scholarship, so they can have a context who you are, what you're teaching, everything. This is
Okay.
your moment. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I am now not teaching. I am officially retired. I
Yeah.
spent most of my career at Princeton Seminary in New Jersey. And then the last part of my career, I spent at Baylor University here in Texas. And I've been retired for several years now. But I still enjoy having a chance to teach and to
Mhm.
stay active in the field.
Mm. Great. Thank you so much, Beverly. All right, so let's go dive right in. The first way to begin this conversation, Beverly is showing up on the screen. So we're going to be addressing basic things, but very important, such as the distinctiveness of Romans, the purpose of the letter, and this is something that I like most, the literary and rhetorical features. So go ahead, Beverly. Be our guy.
Okay. Well, I think most people know that Romans is distinctive among Paul's letters, not
Mhm.
just because it's the longest, but because this is the one letter that he addresses to believers in a place he's never been. Right? He didn't
Yeah.
start. It's not like Corinth or Thessaloniki or Philippi, where he's the one who, so far as we know, initially taught and preached and so forth. And he has not ever been to Rome, which is a problem for him.
Mhm.
He knows some people. That seems evident from the greetings we get at the end of the letter. But it does mean that he has to proceed a little more carefully, just as any of us would do uh, when we um, when we talk to people we don't know. We're usually a little more cautious at the outset.
Mhm.
Um, but it doesn't mean, as some people have taken it to mean over the years, it doesn't mean that Paul is writing a kind of theological last will and testament, or his magnum opus. Um, it is a little more, it is more extended. It certainly does some things that his other letters don't do. There's much more use here, explicit use of what we call the Old Testament, his scriptures. There are a
Mm.
lot more formal rhetorical features. Um, there's a far greater analysis of the what we would call the human situation. What is it that God has done, and why has God done it? So there's just a lot of things
Mhm.
there that are different.
Thank you. Part of the process, as I was saying to Beverly off camera, taking the enormous task writing a commentary. I mean, there have been a lot of commentaries, Beverly, in the past, but scholarship, they keep updating new stuff coming out, new insights, new advancements. You know how the academy works. So the process of writing this commentary, in your personal experience, I mean, the impact to you as a writer, you know because many of us might say, well, there's not so much to learn, it's an old ancient letter. Wait a moment, think again.
Yeah,
I mean, me as
yeah,
a reader, but how about you as a writer? It's a whole
right.
new experience.
Yeah, I think with any text, for us to imagine that there's nothing new to say about it, or nothing fresh to say, is really quite mistaken. I'm sure, if you're talking about a grocery list, or a quick message to a friend, maybe there's nothing more from that. But any text that's lasted this long yields some interesting new things if you stand back from it. And also, we change. We bring different questions to a text.
Oh yeah.
There were many periods where people read this and they weren't thinking about Christian relationships with Judaism. And they weren't thinking about the harm that could be done by certain positions. They weren't thinking about what it means to talk about women in leadership. So we have different angles, different questions that we bring to bear.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Beverly. So, I like to, to include some quotes here from your book, just for the sake of the audience. So you said there is a widespread agreement that Romans is an occasional letter, but articulating the purposes, okay, as on the end of the letter proves challenging. Okay, this is Beverly being honest. Thank you for that. Thank you for staying a human. Precisely because Paul writes carefully as he addresses gatherings largely unknown to him. Given the length and complexity of the letter, it seems wise to think in terms of purposes rather than a single purpose. Now, this takes me back to the initial, part of this question or topics. Now, in terms of literary and rhetorical features, Beverly, what can you say about that?
Oh, well, there's, of course, an immense amount to say. I think it's important to see how a lot of people have worked on the formal features of the letter, the use of the diatribe, the use of scriptural quotation. I'm a little less interested in that, or I want to push beyond that to ask, why does he do it this way?
Yeah.
And I think if we pursue that, what we see is often what he's doing is actually inviting his auditors, because they mostly will hear this, they're not going to read it, inviting his auditors into certain conclusions that he then overturns or corrects.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, if I could give an example, at the end of the first chapter, he has this long tirade, the diatribe, about the sinfulness. It looks to be the sinfulness of Gentiles. They are idolatrous. They replace God. They have all these terrible things that they do. And I think he really invites the auditors to say, yeah, that's right. Those people are really bad. Other people are bad. But then what he does is in 2:1, he turns it and says, you are judging yourselves because you do the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean they do exactly the same things, but I think it does mean they too, everyone eventually is found guilty before God.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Beverly. I decided to include it. Don't worry, people in the audience or people watching this video afterwards. Don't worry, this is not a text critical session because they see manuscript and people get freaked out. No, easy. But this is just a way to to bring you closer to the text of Romans, because this may sound like one-on-one New Testament class. But people out there, please don't forget your Bible, your New Testament. It wasn't written in English in the first place, nor in Spanish. No, they were written in very dead old languages. In the case of New Testament, Beverly can attest to this better than me. It was written in Koine Greek. So I decided to include that here, one of the slides, Beverly. Now, I have another quote here for the audience. I think this is pertinent to your comment. You know, it says even given a name. This one belongs to. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Now you know my secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. This is the one. So there is a widespread agreement that Romans is an occasional letter, but I think I read this one already. Oh,
You
what's
did.
going on? Oh, sorry about it. It has to be this one. Oh, it's this one.
Here
Thank
you
you.
are.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There you go. So the influence of this letter persists in disputes regarding same-sex relations and the role of civil government, but it also persists as words of comfort in funeral liturgies, to say nothing of counters well-worn Bibles. I like that quote.
Thank you.
Beverly continues and said, Romans is distinctive for its extensive engagement with Israel's scriptures. Its use of, I don't know how to pronounce that little word, diatribal. Can you help me, Beverly?
Diatribal.
Diatribal style. Thank you. And what I will refer to as the rhetorical feint. What's that?
Right. Well, that's what I was just talking about. It's when you,
Okay.
you know, I think if you were, I don't know anything about wrestling, so I may be about to make a huge mistake. But if you were
Okay.
in a wrestling match and you you give a little to your opponent in order to throw that person off balance, right? I
Mhm.
think in a way what Paul does, not that I think he has necessarily opponents here, but I think he sometimes lets them believe they know where he's going, and he's really going in a slightly different direction. I think it's far more subtle than we've sometimes imagined. And it's partly because what you quote here, he can't say, now I told you this, you know, why don't you remember what I told you? Or what he
Yeah.
often does is, as you remember, I told you such and such, when of course he knows they don't remember.
Mm.
So he can't draw on his authority in the same way that I think he can in other situations.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I continue the quote here. These features of the letter may be related to Paul's status as an outsider who needs to proceed carefully and who does so by employing a recognized basis for his appeals that will be shared by the auditors. He cannot draw on the relationship to them or on his apostolic authority. As I was skimming through, your commentary, you talk about this caught my attention. You talk about that you are employing an hermeneutic of generosity. I think it's the word.
Yes.
So please talk about that because I think it's very, very important
Okay.
in terms of your
Yeah,
approach.
I'm happy to do that. It's interesting to me how many people have picked up on that phrase.
Hmm.
I think in the last 40, 45 years, half century, in
Okay.
biblical scholarship, as outside it, we tend to read with a hermeneutic of suspicion, right? And that's not inappropriate. There are
Okay.
times that call for that. For example, one of the things that you could say about Romans 16 is that Paul makes generous reference there to women in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yep.
a hermeneutic of suspicion says there probably are even more women in leadership than he acknowledges because of the
Hmm.
tendency not to acknowledge women in leadership, right?
Yeah.
Or we tend, and I think I may even do it in the commentary at a couple of points, we tend to think a lot of moves are about establishing personal authority. You know, we're very
Mm-hmm.
suspicious of certain kinds of claims because we believe they're authoritative, claims to authority.
Yeah.
And what And I don't reject any of that. I think that's all well and good. I think we need that. On the other hand, I think that part of it is just as simple as the golden rule. I am trying to read the way I want
Yeah.
to be read. I would like
Okay.
people to read sentences of mine and not assume I am right. That's not the point. But give me the benefit of the doubt. Try to understand what I'm up to. That's what I mean by a generous reading.
Yeah.
And they may conclude that I'm all wrong, that that Paul is all wrong, but at least try to understand what he's doing on its own terms. How does this work?
Yeah. Thank you, Beverly. Now, I cannot move on to the following question, Beverly, without mentioning this. I found it really important. Just at the very first page of your commentary, you said, with gratitude to Phoebe, of St. Croix and all her sisters.
Right.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting decision. I mean, it was
Yes.
interesting to me. I had thought a lot about how I think many writers do, or at least I do. I'm always thinking,
Okay.
well, when I finish this thing, who is the proper dedicatee? I always want it to be a gift for someone.
Yeah, who is it?
And I, for example, my little book, When in Romans, is dedicated to my son and daughter-in-law and grandson. My son is a Presbyterian minister, and my daughter-in-law is an Episcopal priest. And I said, I want this to be something useful for them. In this case, I kept being preoccupied with the role of Phoebe. I think everyone agrees that she is the person who carried the letter to Rome. Sorry, I'm having a little
Take your time. No worries.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Yeah. I think everyone agrees that she took the letter to Rome.
Yeah.
And many people think, as I do, that she actually read the letter. She went. We think there are these little groups of believers throughout certain areas of the city, whether they're house churches or not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And she's probably the one who went from place to place with the letter. She is his authoritative representative, right? So even if she didn't read the letter, she is the one who represents it, and she is the one who's going to get the questions.
Oh,
She's the one who knows what he wants from it. So she is, so far as we can tell, Paul's the first interpreter of this letter. Yeah. And throughout the commentary, I don't do a lot with this. I wish I could have done more, but I sometimes pause to say, when Phoebe read this, this might have happened. And, I'm impressed by the fact that throughout the centuries, there have been women reading and interpreting this letter in one way or another.
Yeah.
It is not, it is not the case that it was handed down, from Origen to Augustine to Luther to Aquinas to Luther to Calvin to Karl Barth.
Yeah.
Even though I learn a lot from those interpreters, there are a lot of other interpreters whose names we don't know, we will never know.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to honor them.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Thank you, Beverly. I'm with you on that. That's why I decided, I need to include some slide about that, and here it is. Here it is. All right, let's move on. Thank you for that. I like this one, Beverly. So Romans chapter 4, God's righteousness. Dikaiozune, I think it is. You can correct me. My Greek is not that good.
Fine.
Okay.
You're doing fine.
So Abraham as prototype. What can you tell about that, Beverly?
Right. Okay. because Paul says that Abraham believed, right? He is often taken as an example.
Yeah.
Right? We have Abraham as an example of faith. And I don't object to that in a general way. But I think it becomes problematic when Abraham becomes kind of the athlete of faith. You know, he's the striker, as it were, if you're talking about football. That's a really bad analogy. But
that's a good
throughout that chapter,
I like football.
well, right now everybody likes football, right?
Oh yeah. Thank you, Beverly. You're sending commercial right there to a World Cup.
Throughout the chapter, what Paul lifts up is not Abraham's faith so much as it is God's actions with and for Abraham, in response to which Abraham does the right thing, right? He has faith, he trusts God. But throughout, the emphasis is on God calling Abraham, God promising to Abraham, God delivering on the promise. So I think he's more prototype of God's action in Jesus for human beings than he is prototype of the true believer.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Is there having any debate about this word dikaiosune, or scholars agree about the translation, the employment, how Paul employs this term? Something that we should be aware of this?
Yeah, it's a notoriously difficult problem of translation in English into English.
Okay.
And people make different decisions, and I think most people acknowledge that whatever you do, it's not right. You know, the words just don't sit together well. There's no English word that is the exact equivalent. It can be translated as justice, or the basic choices in English are justice or righteousness, as you have on the screen. I tend to prefer righteousness because, at least in my context, justice is so much equated with people getting what's coming to them. You know, you get what you deserve. And we know that people don't get what they deserve. And people get a warped kind of justice. And I don't think that's what Paul is talking about. Now, on the other side, you would say righteousness. People who argue for justice say righteousness sounds like it's some, it either sounds like self-righteousness, or it connotes a kind of religion that's just in the head and the heart and doesn't have anything to do with real world. And I acknowledge that that's a problem, but that's the one I choose to have over against translating it justice, which tends to me to produce fairly limited understanding of what Paul is up to.
All right, thank you, Beverly. Let's move on. We're doing pretty good with time here. I'm glad about that. So, question number 3, Beverly, in your reading of chapter 5, how does Paul seem to understand Christ's death consequences? This is a big question.
To answer that in Romans, you really have to start almost back with chapter 1 and go all the way through chapter 8. But that's okay. In chapter 5, have we lost?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. In chapter 5, I think what we get most basically is we get this analogy between Adam and Christ, right?
Yeah.
In Adam, all sinned. That is to say, Adam's act of disobedience ushered sin into the world, and sin conquered human beings, all of them, without exception. And so the parallel is in Christ's death, God conquered death and sin, and it also involves everyone. I mean, the analogy doesn't work if you say Adam's sin involved everyone and Christ's obedience only involved some people. That means Adam in that analogy becomes more powerful than death. Than Christ, because the consequences, because of the way he set this up, even more, he keeps repeating. If you're trying to read this and comment on it, it feels like you're stuck, and, of course, he doesn't say everyone believes. That's not his point. His point is that Christ's action is for all. Some people know it now. Some people have received that gift of faith. Others have not, but that doesn't change the action itself.
Yeah. Now, this is very, I can't help but mention this, Beverly, but every time I run into this kind of topic, I'm reminded about this article. I think we mentioned that on the last time you were on the show. You have this article about an apocalyptic reading of Christ's death. Is there something in there that you'd include in, some new fresh ideas from that view? Because you also talk about the gospel intrusion, and you talk also a little bit about your mentor, J. Louis Martin. So if you can say anything, just a bit of that view, something here included, that would be much appreciated.
Sure, of course. I mean, I was speaking narrowly to Romans 5, but I am one of a number of people influenced by Lou Martin, before him by Ernst Käsemann, and it is, in a sense, an ancient view. I think it's Paul's view. Paul says more than one thing about the death of Jesus. Right?
Yeah.
In 2 Corinthians 5, the crucifixion, the cross, becomes a moment of revelation.
Okay.
That's how we know things. We know things from the cross on, right? Which means our way of perceiving other people has been altered by the cross. In Romans, you get several statements, but I think the larger one in Romans is that in Christ's death, sin and death itself are defeated. Because Christ is, later on it becomes explicit in the Christus Victor tradition. Christ is, in a sense, held by death. That's what you get in Romans 6. And the death of Jesus conquers death and sin. So there is this victorious element.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. I want to move here before going with the following question, Beverly. Here are, books, they get reviews, endorsements, blurbs. I kind of love them. So in Beverly's book, is not an exception. So I have collected a couple of ones here. I want to begin with this one from Thomas G. Long. He says, in Gaventa's hands, the text of Romans is luminescent. Oh, that's kind of poetic. Love it. Then I got here from the one and only John M.G. Barkley, Lightfoot Professor of Divinity at Durham University. He says, Gaventa skillfully cuts her own path through the thicket of scholarly debates about Roman. Beverly, you should be flattered about it. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm very grateful for such generous readers.
Thank you. I have a couple of other here. I got Susan Eastman. She's from Duke University, if I'm not mistaken, Duke Divinity School. She says, Gaventa's magisterial commentary on Romans constantly surprises the reader with new insights into a letter that never gets old. Then I got Ephraim Augusto. He says, Gaventa on Romans is a must read for all students and scholars alike of Paul, Romans, and the New Testament. Yeah. I have another one here for you, Beverly, and for the audience. I think it's the last one. It goes like there. Okay, this is Philip G. Ziegler. This is a landmark of contemporary biblical exegesis. How about that? Love it, love it, love it, love it. Thank you for that. Let's continue here with the fourth question, dear Beverly. Let me put it right there on your screen. Let me know if you can see it. All right, there you go. So, da-da-da-dum. This is Romans 9 through 11. So, Romans 9, verses 1 through chapter 11, 36 has proven to be a challenge. And let me emphasize that word, a challenge in terms of interpretation. What fresh insights do you lay out in your commentary, Beverly?
Yeah, I think any reader of Romans who claims to have a new idea it has probably not read around long enough in the literature, because many things have been said.
Yeah.
What I well, your photo up there, your slide, helps a lot to explain where I go. I start, well, I don't start, but my conclusion is what I will lay out.
Yes.
Is that, and I think the most important thing to understand is that Romans 9 through 11 is best framed as God's dealing with Israel.
Yes.
And the Gentiles, but it's God's dealings. And when we turn it around and make it about Israel rejecting Jesus or Israel's disobedience, then we kind of get off the track at the very beginning.
Okay.
Which is not to say that there aren't some questions here, but you have to understand at the beginning that this is about what God is up to. And so what I think he's doing is, in that first section in chapter 9, he talks about God creating Israel, calling Israel into being.
Okay.
Right? And what that suggests to me is, first of all, he means all. He doesn't mean just the people who believe. He's very adamant in chapter 9 that this is God's doing. It has nothing to do with anybody except God. Yeah. It's not about Abraham. It's not about Isaac. It's not about Sarah or Rebecca. It's about God, right? And then he turns it at the end of the chapter. God has done a strange thing, because God is now called Gentiles too. There's a little thread that runs through about that. Then you get into chapter 10, and he talks about God having tripped Israel. And he doesn't say some of Israel and not others, which is really interesting. I think it's important here all the way through to understand that he's talking about the present time.
Yeah.
He's not talking about a sort of long history of Israel's disobedience. He contrasts Israel having fallen, having tripped in the present, with the Gentiles believing. So it's the present time. It's not some, it's post-Christ time, right? And how does he resolve that? So what does this mean about Israel? In chapter 11, he goes to a very traditional argument. God has, there's a remnant and there's the rest. And that does not mean that the rest have been rejected altogether. It means God is using this division to bring about the inclusion of the Gentiles. And so he
Yeah.
ends up, all Israel will be saved. He doesn't
Mm.
say how or when or on what terms, but again, it's about God. So it's God doing this. In 1132, it's God confined all to sin, to disobedience, that God might have mercy on all.
Mm. All right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And I think, again, if we people get hung up with, how many is all, and does
Yeah.
this
How
mean
many?
every single person, and blah 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 blah. And I
Yeah.
think at that point, again, we've missed the thread, because the point is
Yeah.
what God is doing, not to count heads. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It makes sense to me, Beverly. It makes sense to me. I mean, me personally, as a layman, I think I suggest that many times we, get fixating on some very unimportant things, and we're missing as you said in your country, we're missing the forest for the trees. I think it is, because we're lost in the details, in the nitty bitty details there, and sometimes we need to just, lay back to appreciate the wider background or outlook of what we are interpreting. Now I think this is appropriate time to read the previous quote that I got for you in the audience. And okay, there you go. So Beverly says, even given a name to the issue that drives these chapters is challenging. Okay. Is it the fact that most Jews do not recognize in Jesus of Nazareth the Messiah of God? Or is it instead the possibility that God has proven fickle with respect to the promise to Israel? Perhaps Paul's concern lies with the arrogance of Gentile Christians who condescend to Israel. Given the conclusion of this section, with the repeated insistence on God's provision for all, okay, in chapters 11, 26 through 32, and its warning against pretending to know God's plan. Another potential concern lies with the false claim to understand God's mind. I mean, I don't understand God's mind. That's beyond me. All of these issues are in play in this rich argument. But reading these chapters in close proximity are in play, to the end of chapter 8, with triumphant declaration of God's present provision for a future redemption of all creation. And then you said, this suggests that the overarching question is where Israel belongs to God's eschatological victory. I like the way you narrow it down there with this question. So, it's a very difficult passages, 9 through 11.
Yeah.
I had Mark Nanos the other day. I asked him about this, and I remember he said, man, that's a challenge. Where should I start?
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to get at there is that we usually read, and we all do it, 9 through 11 as if it were a separate section that had nothing to do with what comes before. This is what I was trying to say earlier about following the letter and seeing where it leads us. Because the end of Romans 8, he's talked about the redemption of creation, and the end of Romans 8, nothing, and all creation will separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ our Lord. Well, the question that cries out then is, what about Israel? Does Israel have a place in this love of Christ? Or is Israel off? How is this possible? I think he has to answer that question as much for himself as for anyone else.
Yeah. Thank you, Beverly. Now, Beverly, please forgive me on this that I'm about to say, but I skipped one very important question. I don't know why. Maybe I got mixed here in my slides, but it has to be with this one. Let me put it right there on the screen. So if you just can give us your opinion, I sent you this article, Kevin Grazzo's article, because he's arguing for a third view. So if you can just give me your view, what do you think about that? It's worth it. That would be much appreciated.
Mark, I have to tell you that I have not recently looked at that piece,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm sorry, I can't. I
Mm.
did not. I did not do my homework.
No,
Um,
no worries. That's okay.
but
But
as you know, I actually take a third view,
oh, you do.
and
Okay.
I I don't think this is a debate that can be resolved on grammatical grounds alone.
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you.
that's part of the problem, is that we
Yeah.
keep trying to argue grammar at each other, and there are some questions that can't be resolved that way.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there are problems with either view. If you
Okay.
insist that it is Jesus's this means Jesus's faith, then you've got several problems. Paul doesn't talk about Jesus believing. Um, it sort of reduces things, or Jesus's obedience seems to import a kind of gospel thread into this that doesn't quite work. On the other hand, if you argue that it's human faith, then you're making
Mm-hmm.
God's work depend on our believing. I came to think of this a as a shorthand
Okay.
for, and this is a little bit awkward, but for uh, the faith generating faithfulness of
Mm-hmm.
Christ, right? More along the lines of what Morna Hooker argued years ago.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Kevin Grazzo's appealing to grammatical grounds. On grammatical grounds. I read the whole article. But uh, I sent an email to him. He didn't respond. I don't know why. Maybe I caused a little, I hope I didn't make him uncomfortable with my question. But yeah, he's a guy who spent a lot of time on grammar things, and that's the at least the whole approach he's taking.
Yeah,
So just
yeah.
for people out there, this thing exists. Okay, you can go to his academic page. You can find it right there. He's open access or freely available on the internet, so you can read it for yourself and enjoy yourself. So thank you for that, Beverly. Let's continue here. I think we already addressed this one. Oh no, this is the topic number 5. So Beverly, differences over dinner and the danger of being right. I thought it's a great thing to being right, but always right, not so much, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah. Um, well, that title, I have to say, is a little bit influenced by Karl Barth's treatment of this passage, uh,
Okay,
which when I
all right.
first read it, I thought was strange, and I had, like a lot of Barth, I had to figure out what is he doing here. But
Mm-hmm.
what he says is that this passage is directly addressed to people who have read the entire letter to this point and who agree with it,
Mm-hmm.
who understand it, who get it. They know that it doesn't matter what you eat. But there are those who do find it still matters to them. And it is a problem if your faith causes somebody else's uh,
Oh yeah,
faith to
that's the
fall, right?
yeah, yeah.
Now, you can take that too far if you try to apply it in certain kind of ecclesiastical settings, where you
Mm-hmm.
say that you never move on. But I think there's something very astute there about the
Mm-hmm.
dangers of assuming that you are right and therefore you can just run roughshod over everybody else.
Hmm. Thank you, Beverly. I'm hungry now because I'm looking at all this food there. Oh my goodness! But I had my breakfast first, so no worries. I'm fine. Uh, yeah, this is a very important thing because even in our context, our modern context, sometimes, uh, because I don't know what you have to say, what you think about this, Beverly, but many of us multiple times cherry pick Bible verses and try to patch them here and there and form or a block of doctrine upon those cherry picking passages.
Right.
And that happens with this kind of passages.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It really happens.
Yeah. I think the fundamental point here is that it's is the comment early on about how each person, all of these people, whatever their practice is, are people who are, in Paul's language, servants in the house of God. They're not subject to your rules, right?
Yeah.
And communities make rules. Elsewhere, Paul draws lines, but there are things that are dividing and there are things that are not. And in his view, this question of what you eat when you come together in a communal meal ought not be divisive.
That's a good piece of advice right there. All right. Let's move on here. Let's continue. I think we're doing pretty good. This is topic number 6 or question? I think it's question number 6. Let's put it right there. Let's see. So I like this one because it really has to do with our modern context. So Beverly, how applicable do you find Romans 13 to our modern times?
As you know, in the U.S., this is a fascinating example of a place
Tell me about
where
Yeah.
some Christians affirm Romans 13 when they are in favor of the current government. But they tend to ignore it when they're not. But I can give you specific examples of how that happens. I think the thing to say about Romans 13 is that, sure, there are things there for us to learn, but we have to be aware of tremendous gaps between what Paul has written and our situation. First of all, he's not writing to authorities to give them license to do whatever they want to do. He is writing to believers, right? And it looks like at the end of the passage, the real question is, are they going to pay their taxes? And his response is, yes, pay your taxes because I don't want you to get in trouble over this. It's not worth it, right? This was never written to address a democratic government. It's completely off the charts. It can't really be compared. But what we can get, and I do think there's something positive here, is, first of all, his statement, God puts people in these positions. Now, that doesn't mean that any particular person who's been elected is elected by God. But
that's right.
In Paul's context, it is a warning that, that authorities too are subject to God. They are not God. Right? They're subject to God's judgment. And in the second place, read in the context of both chapter 12 and chapter 14, what Romans does is to say, I think for us, is to say, we must not, and this is very hard in my setting, we must not give way to the temptation to despise or hate people in power. To the extent that it's possible, we must affirm God's love for them, even if we find what they do utterly reprehensible. There has to be some recognition that this too, even this person, is a child of God.
Yeah.
It's very hard even for me to say that, but it is a kind
I
of
mean,
constant, absolutely. It is kind of a constant reminder.
it's I mean, if I can put my context here in Honduras, it's very difficult, to come to grips with this passage because our human side, comes to the surface, and there have been a lot of political decisions that had impacted negatively my countrymen,
Of course.
and at the end of the day, poor people, it's that section of the country who is taking all the bad results and consequences, affecting principally their economy, their finances, and affecting negatively the way they live their lives, making their livelihood even more complicated. So it's a little bit like outraging to some extent when people is taking some passages from the Bible and applying when it's beneficial to their purpose and goals. But
Right.
as you said, but
Right.
when it's not, okay, just let's
Absolutely.
look
Yeah.
away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would
Yeah,
say that what you have brought up is one of the important criteria. Uh,
yeah.
I mean, over the years, and this has gone on since the third or fourth century, Christians have read that passage and said, um, what Paul said is respect the authorities, but we are also taught in the book of Acts and elsewhere, we
Mhm.
owe our allegiance to God, not to human beings,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We must obey God rather than humans, right? And so we have to discern. And I think one place for discernment is to see who is being hurt by policies and practices, right? Who is
yeah,
being damaged. And you've brought up an uh, exact example there.
yeah. Uh, we can talk a lot about that topic specifically,
Yeah,
but
I
we're
know.
gonna leave it right there. We're gonna leave it right there. Thank you, Beverly. Okay, let me put out right there. This, I think this is the last and one of my favorite ones because it has to do with Junia. So Beverly, in Romans 16, Paul grades a bunch of collaborators. Chief among them, Junia. What's your position on her apostleship? Is the debate settled on that this name points to a woman? What do you have to leave us there in your commentary?
Yeah, well, I think insofar as anything in New Testament study is ever settled, I think the
Hmm.
overwhelming number of scholars agree that this is a woman's name.
Yeah.
Uh, in Greek, I don't want to get into too far into the weeds on this, but in Greek, it technically speaking, it could be a man's name Junius or a woman's name
Hmm.
Junia.
Yeah.
Uh, but there is no evidence in this period for a male named Junius,
Yeah. Yeah.
and for the first millennium of the church's life, people assumed this was a woman. And it's
Hmm.
there's a lot more evidence, but it seems clear this is a woman. The debate has shifted a little bit to the question of what does Paul mean when he says she is respected
Yeah.
among the apostles. Um,
Hmm.
and some people take that to mean apostles respect her, but she's not one of them,
Hmm. Yeah.
or she
I heard
is
that argument.
respected as an apostle. I
Hmm.
think there's a strong reason for assuming that she is an apostle, because Paul never elsewhere says, you know, the apostles respect such and such a person. It's a very strange thing for him to say.
Hmm.
The more important question is, what does he mean by apostle? He
Yeah.
certainly doesn't mean one of the 12, the way Luke would mean it,
Yeah.
because by that standard, Paul himself is not an apostle. He's not one of the 12. Um,
Yeah.
but by the same token, we can't limit what she does.
Hmm.
he gives her equal status, if you want to talk about status, with Andronicus, who's presumably her husband.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And for people interested, in more literature, what I can do is just drop some links at the end on the notes of this episode, so you can be a little bit more aware what's the other literature, because there have been written a lot about this topic specifically. So I was very interested to see where Beverly land on this very important topic. I mean, if Junia, I was listening to a scholar, Beverly, the other day, and he said that in medieval manuscripts there's evidence where scribes they don't like that the fact that there was a woman name in that list from Romans 16, because they were not down with Paul having a woman as apostle. So they scratching it has to be a man.
Some things
and I was
don't
like,
change.
really? Yeah.
I'm sure you know the literature, but I would suggest people read Eldon Epp's book on this question. As well as a very fine article by Yi-Jan Lin in the Journal of Biblical Literature just 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, with that, I'm gonna ask you a favor. If you can send me like the full name, I can look it up and just grab the link, put it on the notes, so people can have access to that article, because I haven't read that specifically.
Yeah,
no, I haven't.
That's really an important piece. And if I forget, just send me a note and I'll get it to you.
I will do it. Beverly, those are all the questions. I think we're pretty good with the time here, and I'm glad about that. And just your final comments for our audience.
Well, it's always good to talk about Romans, and I appreciate your generous spirit, Murph.
It is indeed. Now, people out there, just give us a like, leave a comment. That's the way you can help us spread the word. Thank you for supporting what we do. This is our passion. It's really, I'm not overstating this, but it's really an honor to get to talk to scholars like Beverly, and people out there who is maybe asking why I'm addressing her by her name. Easy on me, because she's like granting me permission. I know Professor Beverly. That's the first way I address her, but she was very kind and said, you just can't call me Beverly. Just leave it right there. So don't burn me at the stake. Yeah, don't burn me at the stake. So just check out our future interviews, and we're trying to cover as much as possible, and to give this platform to all the voices, pro and con. I'm trying to be very fair and square in that position. So with Beverly Gaventa here and myself, it will be until the next time. Take care. Blessings. Bye-bye now.
Bye.